The air was still, the kind of quiet that only comes when grief is too heavy for sound. Flags hung half-mast, motionless against a sky that looked tired. A bugle cried out in the distance, thin and trembling, and the crowd at the cemetery bowed their heads. Among them stood Marcus Reed, tall, shoulders squared, the weight of 1,000 memories pressed into his spine. He wore a dark suit, too plain for who he really was. The jacket fit snugly, hiding the rows of medals pinned inside. They were tucked there, away from eyes that judged first and listened later. He didn't come for recognition. He came for his brother-in-arms, Corporal Darren Cole, laid in a flag-draped coffin just a few yards ahead. Marcus didn't cry. He hadn't cried since Afghanistan. The silence was enough. A police cruiser rolled up on the gravel road, tires crunching the quiet to dust. Heads turned. The officer stepped out. Officer Raymond Daniels, white, mid-40s, jaw tight, eyes sharp like someone used to control. His badge caught the sunlight, flashing like a blade. He looked at Marcus the way a guard dog studies a stranger. "Excuse me," Daniels said, voice cutting through the hush. "You mind stepping aside, sir?" Marcus turned slowly. "It's a funeral," I said, "step aside." Murmurs rippled through the mourners. The priest paused mid-prayer. The officer's hand hovered near his holster, not touching it, but close enough for everyone to notice. Marcus didn't move. "You're interrupting a burial," Daniels frowned. "Got a call about a suspicious male loitering near government property." "You matched the description," a woman whispered. "He's a veteran." Daniels didn't flinch. "Sir, I'm asking you nicely. Step over here." Marcus's eyes stayed on the coffin. "That man in there took a bullet so you could sleep safe. You'll finish his funeral before you finish your check." The tension cracked like dry wood. The officer stepped closer, close enough that Marcus could smell his cologne, cheap and eager. "Hands where I can see them," Daniel said. "Officer," the priest started. "This is quiet, Father." Marcus sighed, slow, heavy. "You sure you want to do this?" Daniel's radio crackled. Static filled the silence. Someone whispered, "Please, just let it go." But Daniels couldn't. Men like him never did. He reached for Marcus's arm. Marcus stepped back. The officer grabbed harder. The crowd gasped, "Stop resisting." Daniels barked. Marcus stood still, eyes steady like stone. "You don't know what resistance looks like." Daniels yanked him forward, spinning him toward the cruiser. The metals inside Marcus's jacket clinked faintly, a sound no one noticed yet. A boy in the crowd pulled out his phone. The red light blinked alive, the cuffs clicked. The sound cut deeper than any insult. Daniels shoved Marcus against the car. "Name, Marcus Reed, what are you doing here?" "Burying my brother." Daniels leaned in. "You have ID?" "In my wallet." "Right pocket." Daniels fished it out, glancing at the military insignia stamped on the card. He hesitated but didn't stop. "What's in the jacket?" Marcus didn't answer. "Answer me." "History," Marcus said quietly. The boy kept filming. The camera shook with every breath. The old veterans in the back shifted uneasily, fists curling at their sides. "Open it," Daniels ordered. Marcus didn't move. "No." "Then I'll do it." Daniel's voice cracked, a thread of anger wrapped around fear. He grabbed the zipper. The metal teeth parted slowly, like something sacred being undone. When the jacket opened, the sunlight caught it, the shimmer of rows of combat medals. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Distinguished Service Cross, dozens, lined like silent witnesses. The crowd gasped. The boy's camera trembled. The priest crossed himself. Daniels froze. The color drained from his face. Marcus's voice was soft. "You done searching?" No one spoke. Even the wind forgot to move. Daniel stepped back, his hand falling uselessly to his side. I didn't know." "That's the point," Marcus said. The boy lowered his phone, still recording. Daniel swallowed, looking around for an escape that didn't exist. "I was just following a call." "Calls don't come from nowhere," Marcus said. Someone saw a black man standing too proud and thought it was a threat. Silence again, heavy, shameful. The other officers, who had just arrived, stopped short when they saw the medals. One whispered, "Holy hell," the priest finally spoke. "This man fought for this country," Daniel stammered. "I didn't mean..." Marcus cut him off. "Don't talk. Just look." He turned back toward the coffin, cuffs still on. Darren deserved better than this circus. A woman from the crowd, Darren's mother stepped forward, tears streaking her cheeks. "Son," she said softly, "let him go." Daniels hesitated, then fumbled for the key. The cuffs clicked open. Marcus rubbed his wrists but didn't look at the officer. "You're not the first," he said quietly. "You won't be the last." The bugle started again, faint, broken, as if even the instrument had lost faith. The coffin began to lower. Marcus stood still, hands clasped in front of him. The camera was still rolling. Somewhere in that moment a story began to spread. Whispers turned into murmurs. Mourners turned into witnesses. Daniel stepped back, eyes wet. Not from empathy, but from the sudden collapse of the world he thought he understood. Marcus didn't smile, didn't gloat. He just stared at the coffin. "Rest easy, brother," he whispered. The last note of the bugle faded into silence. The sound that followed wasn't peace, it was reckoning. Quiet but certain. And in that stillness no one dared to breathe too loud, because they all knew something sacred had just been broken, and something greater had just been born. That night the video hit the internet. No hashtags, no captions, just a 30-second clip. A black man in handcuffs, a cop's hand on his shoulder. The slow unzip of a jacket revealing a wall of medals that shimmered like judgment. It spread like wildfire. 1 share, then 10, then 1,000. By dawn the world knew the name Marcus Reed. He didn't post it. He didn't need to. Truth had a way of leaking through cracks no system could seal. Marcus sat alone in his kitchen, the glow of his phone lighting the medals laid out before him. Each one reflected a piece of his past. The brothers he lost, the nights he bled, the oaths he kept. The screen pinged with messages he didn't open. Reporters, veterans, strangers. He sipped cold coffee. Outside, sirens wailed somewhere far away. A soft knock. He didn't move. Another knock. Firmer this time. He opened the door to find Lena Brooks, a journalist from the local paper. Recorder in hand, eyes sharp but kind. "Mr. Reed, can I talk to you?" "No interviews. It's already out there." "Your name, your face?" "People are demanding answers." "Then let them," she hesitated. The department released a statement, said the officer acted on credible suspicion. Marcus almost laughed. "Suspicion's been credible my whole life." Lena lowered the recorder. "I served 2 years covering the border. I've seen how systems twist themselves to stay upright. If you tell your story, maybe this time," he cut her off. "This time won't be different." She looked at the medals. "Maybe it could be," he sighed. "Every medal in that pile was earned in silence." "You think one video changes what they see when they look at me?" She didn't answer. He gestured toward the door. "Go write about the funeral. That's the story that matters." Lena hesitated, then slipped her card onto the table. "When you're ready," she left. Marcus stared at the card for a long time. By noon his phone rang again. Unknown number. He ignored it. Rang again, then again. Finally he answered. "This is Marcus." "Mr. Reed, this is Captain Jennings from the precinct. We'd like to clear the air. Maybe hold a press conference." "No. I understand you're upset. You don't understand a thing. We just want to de-escalate public tension." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Tension didn't start yesterday. Look, the officer feels terrible. We can—" Marcus hung up. He set the phone down gently, like a grenade with the pin half pulled. Outside, cameras began to gather near his fence. A neighbor shouted something about heroes. Another shouted about race. The words tangled in the air, ugly and restless. Marcus closed the blinds. He sat at the table again, staring at the medals. He ran his thumb over the Purple Heart. The metal was cold. A knock came once more. Softer this time. Familiar. When he opened the door, it was Pastor Evans, gray-haired, slow smile. "Son," the pastor said. "You holding up?" Marcus nodded slightly. "They're saying you might sue. Not interested, you should be." "I didn't do this for revenge." Evans nodded. "Then do it for truth. Sometimes justice needs a stage before it finds a soul." Marcus looked out at the street. Reporters everywhere, microphones aimed like rifles. "I hate stages," he said. "I know," Evans replied. "But silence feeds the beast," Marcus exhaled. "Then maybe it's time to starve it." That night he called Lena. "I'll talk," he said. Her voice trembled slightly. "Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow." When dawn came, the city was humming. The video had reached national news. Anchors called him a hero, a victim, a symbol. None of those names felt real. Lena met him outside the paper's office. Cameras flashed. Inside, she pressed record. "Tell me what happened." Marcus's voice was steady. "What happened? A cop did what the world trained him to do. Saw a black man standing tall and thought danger. Didn't ask who I was, just who I wasn't." Lena leaned forward. "And who are you, Marcus Reed?" He looked down. "A soldier who never stopped fighting even when the war came home." She nodded. "What do you want people to learn from this?" "I want them to stop acting surprised." Silence filled the room. Outside, protesters began to gather. Signs rose, "Justice for Marcus." No more silence. Serve and protect, not suspect. The chief of police held his own press briefing that afternoon. Words like miscommunication and procedural review floated through microphones. Daniels was placed on temporary leave. The crowd wasn't buying it. That night, the footage played on every channel. Talk shows dissected it. Veterans called in furious. Politicians tweeted. Hashtags trended. Marcus watched none of it. He sat by the window listening to the crickets, the sound of a world trying to forget what it just learned. Then the phone rang again. "Unknown number, Mr. Reed? Speaking. This is attorney Sarah Cruz. I represent the Civil Rights Council. We'd like to help you file a case." I told the pastor no lawsuits. "This isn't about money," she said. "It's about precedent." He didn't answer. She continued. "You served your country. Now let your story serve others." Marcus closed his eyes. Darren's face flickered in his memory. The grin, the uniform, the flag. "Send me the papers," he said quietly. The next day, the lawsuit hit headlines. Decorated veteran files federal complaint against police department. The city trembled. Daniels avoided cameras. His house was vandalized overnight. The department doubled security. Talk radio turned into a battleground of blame, but Marcus stayed silent. He visited Darren's grave every evening. Brought coffee, talked softly to the stone. "They think I'm fighting them," he whispered one night, "but I'm still fighting for you." He left a medal on the headstone, a bronze star. Reporters photographed it the next morning, calling it a symbol of dignity. By the end of the week, petitions reached Congress. The Justice Department announced an inquiry. Marcus's lawyer called. "They'll come after your past, you know. Records, service reports, everything." "Let them," he said. She hesitated. "You sure you're ready for that?" No one ever asked if I was ready for war either. That night, storms rolled in. Thunder crawled across the sky. Marcus stood on his porch, rain soaking his shirt, eyes fixed on the dark horizon. For the first time in years, he felt something close to purpose. Not peace, but purpose. Inside, the metals gleamed under the lightning. He whispered to himself, maybe silence wasn't strength after all. The courthouse steps smelled of rain and sweat and camera flash. Reporters crowded the path, shouting his name like it belonged to them. Marcus Reed kept walking. His suit was plain, pressed, unarmed. Behind him, his attorney Sarah Cruz carried a folder that looked heavier than law should ever feel. "Mr. Reed, do you believe this is about race?" a reporter yelled. Marcus paused just long enough to meet the question with silence. Cameras leaned forward, hungry for sound. He said nothing. Silence carried louder than any speech. Inside, marble floors echoed every step. The hall was lined with portraits of judges, white faces, stern eyes. Sarah noticed him looking. "Don't let the walls talk to you," she whispered. "They already are," he said. They entered the courtroom. Officer Daniels sat at the defense table, uniform crisp, hands folded. He looked smaller without the street behind him. His lawyer whispered something, and Daniels nodded stiffly, eyes fixed on the table. Marcus took his seat across the aisle. The air between them felt like a wire ready to snap. The judge entered. "All rise." They stood. Sarah opened with calm precision. "Your Honor, this is not a case of confusion or error. This is a case of perception. How a man's skin color turned respect into suspicion, service into threat." The defense lawyer rose, polished and cool. "Your Honor, Officer Daniels acted within reasonable suspicion. My client received a report of a man behaving suspiciously near a federal event. He followed protocol." "Protocol," Sarah said softly, "should not handcuff honor." The room stirred. Marcus watched Daniels's hands. They trembled slightly. a cop's hands shaking under fluorescent truth. The judge nodded. "Proceed," Sarah called Marcus to the stand. He stood slowly, spine straight, eyes forward. "The bailiff swore him in." "Mr. Reed," Sarah began, "where were you on the morning of the incident?" "At the funeral of Corporal Darren Cole." "And why were you there?" "He was my brother. Not by blood, by battle." "What was your relationship with the defendant before that day?" "None." "Describe what happened." Marcus inhaled, steady but deep. "He asked me to step aside. I told him it was a funeral. He said I matched a report. I told him to finish the burial first. He didn't like that answer. The room was silent. Even the pen stopped moving." Sarah nodded. "And when he opened your jacket?" Marcus's eyes flickered toward Daniel's. "He found the only part of me the world usually forgets." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Sarah smiled faintly. "And those medals, did you earn them in service to this country?" "I earned them because others didn't make it home." Daniel shifted in his seat. Sarah continued, "Mr. Reed, did you resist arrest?" "No, I resisted humiliation." The judge's brow furrowed, Sarah's voice softened. "How did it feel, being handcuffed at your brother's funeral?" Marcus paused. "Like dying twice." Gasps. A flash from a camera. Sarah stepped back. "No further questions." The defense attorney rose. "Mr. Reed, you understand officers must act quickly in uncertain situations?" "I understand fear," Marcus replied. "So you admit your refusal to comply might have escalated the situation?" "No, his fear did that." The lawyer smiled thinly. "You believe the officer was afraid?" Marcus leaned forward slightly. "He wasn't afraid of danger. He was afraid of me standing still." The courtroom felt smaller, tighter. The judge tapped her pen once. "Enough. Continue." The defense tried to reframe the story with words like procedure, duty, misunderstanding. But each phrase collapsed under the weight of the video playing on the courtroom screen. The footage rolled, Daniel shouting. Marcus silent. The zipper. The medals. The freeze. The gasp. The sound of the cuffs clicking echoed again through the speakers. Daniel's face tightened, remembering. When the video ended, no one spoke. Sarah stood. "The defense rests on excuses. My client stands on truth." The judge dismissed for recess. Outside, crowds filled the steps, protesters, veterans, students, mothers. Some held flags. Some held signs. "Dignity is not suspicious. Honor wears every color." Lena Brooks, the journalist, found Marcus near the fountain. "They want your statement," she said. "Let the court speak first. People listen to hearts more than verdicts." He looked at her. "Hearts change slower than laws." She smiled faintly. "Maybe yours already did," he turned away. "Mine never had the luxury of not knowing." Back inside, Daniel sat alone at his table. His lawyer had stepped away. For the first time, he looked at Marcus. Not as a suspect, but as something heavier. "Mr. Reed," he said quietly, "I didn't mean for it to go that way." Marcus looked at him unmoved. "That's what everyone says after the gun goes quiet." Daniel swallowed. "You could have fought me there. You didn't. I fought enough men with guns to know when one's fighting himself." Daniels lowered his eyes. "I'm sorry." Marcus nodded slightly. "You're not sorry yet. But you will be," the judge returned. "Court is back in session." The room fell silent. Sarah called her final witness, a retired general who'd served with Marcus. The man's voice was slow, heavy with memory. "Sergeant Major Reed saved 6 men under fire in Helmand Province," he said. "Carried 2 of them on his back. Got shot twice, didn't leave until the last body was flown out." "Would you consider him a threat?" Sarah asked. The general looked at Marcus. "Only to anyone who mistakes silence for weakness." Daniel's lawyer tried to object, but the judge overruled. As closing statements began, Sarah's tone softened into something almost like prayer. "Your Honor, this isn't just about one man. It's about a country that still checks receipts before recognizing its heroes." The defense muttered about fairness, misunderstanding, reform. But no one was listening anymore. When the judge adjourned, people lingered. The air felt different, charged like the moment before a storm breaks. Outside, rain began to fall again. Marcus stepped into it, letting it wash over his face. Cameras clicked, but he didn't care. Lena approached quietly. "They'll deliberate tomorrow." "I know. What will you do tonight?" He looked toward the courthouse where Daniel still sat inside. Try to remember what peace felt like. She hesitated. You think he'll lose his badge? Marcus's voice was low. He already lost something bigger. What's that? The mirror. Lena looked at him for a long moment. When this ends, what do you want people to remember? Marcus thought, rain dripping down his brow. That standing still isn't the same as being silent. She nodded, whispering, That'll make a good headline. He gave a faint, tired smile. It's not a headline. It's a warning. The sky cracked open, thunder rolling through the city. The crowd dispersed, but the story stayed, etched into screens, hearts, and headlines that couldn't stop replaying the sound of truth unzipping its own jacket. The courthouse smelled of dust and tension the next morning. Reporters camped outside before sunrise, their umbrellas like black flowers in the drizzle. Every channel had a headline waiting to explode. Veteran versus the badge. Inside, the jury filed in. 12 faces, some unreadable, some restless. Marcus watched them the way soldiers watch clouds before a storm. Sarah leaned close. Whatever happens, stay composed. I've been composed since the first bullet I dodged, he said quietly. Across the aisle, Daniel sat pale and hollow-eyed. His wife wasn't there. Neither were his fellow officers. Only his lawyer, sweating through his suit, tapping a pen like it might save him. All rise, the bailiff announced. The judge entered, her expression carved from stone. Please be seated, the jury foreman stood. Your Honor, we have reached a verdict. The room froze. Even the rain outside seemed to hold its breath. The foreman unfolded the paper, voice trembling just slightly. On the charge of wrongful arrest and civil rights violation, we find the defendant liable. Gasps, flashbulbs, a half-second of silence before the room erupted. Reporters scrambled. Protesters outside began to cheer. Daniels lowered his head, face sinking into his hands. Sarah turned to Marcus. You did it, he shook his head. No, we just proved what's already been known. The judge's gavel struck wood. Order! When the room quieted, the judge spoke firmly. This court acknowledges the bravery and dignity of Sergeant Major Marcus Reed. The verdict stands. The city will pay restitution, and disciplinary proceedings will commence immediately. Marcus didn't smile. Justice wasn't supposed to feel this heavy. Outside, the crowd roared. Cameras caught his every step, microphones thrust forward. Mr. Reed, how do you feel? Do you forgive Officer Daniels? Will you take the settlement? Marcus stopped on the steps. I came for accountability, not applause. The flashbulbs exploded again, chasing meaning from his words. Lena found him through the chaos. You made history today. I didn't want history, he said. I wanted humanity. They walked through the crowd, shoulder to shoulder. Somewhere, someone shouted, Hero! And another yelled, Finally! But Marcus didn't hear celebration, only exhaustion. When they reached the street, he saw Daniel standing by his car alone, head bowed. Marcus hesitated, then walked toward him. Reporters followed like vultures. Daniels looked up, eyes red. You got what you wanted. Marcus stopped a few feet away. You think I wanted this? Daniel's jaw trembled. They're suspending me. Might lose my pension. Maybe that's the price of learning. I didn't hate you, Daniels whispered. I was just trained to notice. That's the problem, Marcus said. You weren't trained to see. Daniel's eyes welled. What do you see now? A man who finally realizes the uniform doesn't make him right. The crowd fell silent around them. Two men face to face, one broken by guilt, the other burdened by truth. Marcus turned to leave. You'll remember this day longer than I ever could. He walked away. Daniels didn't move. Back home, the house felt smaller. The medals still lay on the table, gleaming beneath the afternoon light. Marcus stared at them for a long time, wondering why victory felt so much like loss. The doorbell rang. He opened it to find Sarah holding a folder. They offered a public apology, she said. I don't need their words. They'll make policy changes, mandatory racial training, reform committees, things that could help others. He nodded slowly. Then they can apologize to them. Sarah studied him. You could be part of it. Lead the initiative. Use your voice. Marcus looked out the window at the reporters still lingering beyond the fence. My voice was never the problem. Their ears were, Sarah smiled faintly. Maybe they're finally listening. He didn't answer. That evening he visited the cemetery again. The ground was still damp. Darren's name glistened on the headstone under a fresh bouquet of lilies. Marcus knelt. "You'd hate this circus," he said softly. "All these cameras pretending they care." He placed another medal beside the grave. But maybe somewhere in this noise someone heard the truth. A wind brushed through the trees, whispering like approval. Behind him, footsteps. He turned to see Lena holding her camera down, respectful. "Didn't mean to intrude," she said. "You didn't." She knelt beside him. "They're calling this a turning point." He looked at the horizon. "Every turning point still faces the same road." She hesitated. "Do you think forgiveness matters?" Marcus thought for a long moment. Forgiveness is easy when the world admits what it did. Until then, it's just surrender. They sat in silence. The sound of flags flapping nearby filled the air. Lena spoke again gently. "What will you do now?" "Live, maybe that's enough." She smiled faintly. "It should be." As the sun sank, the sky turned gold, then bruised purple. Marcus rose, brushed the dirt from his knees, and looked at the horizon one last time. By the next morning, his face was everywhere. News segments, documentaries, social media banners. Schools taught his name in civics classes. Churches used his story in sermons, but Marcus kept his distance. Fame was just another kind of handcuff. One evening he received a letter, handwritten, no return address. Inside a single line, "I'm leaving the force. Thank you for showing me what I refused to see. Daniels." Marcus read it twice, then burned it over the sink. The paper curled and turned to ash, the smoke rising like something finally released. The next day he walked downtown. The city felt quieter than usual, cautious, watchful. People nodded at him. Some saluted. A few crossed the street, unsure what respect looked like. He stopped at a cafe. The barista hesitated before smiling. "Your coffee's on the house, Mr. Reed." Marcus returned the smile, small and tired. "Make it strong," she nodded. "You earned it." He took his cup outside and sat on a bench. Across the street, a mural covered the police station wall. A painted image of him standing in uniform, jacket open, medals glowing like stars. Below the words, "See before you judge." He stared at it for a long time, then turned away. As dusk settled, the city lights flickered on one by one. The same sky hung above everyone, officers, citizens, believers, skeptics. The same silence, the same fragile hope. Marcus whispered to the wind, "Maybe now, Darren, they'll finally see us." And for once, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. Weeks passed. The noise faded, but the echoes stayed. The city moved slower now, like it was thinking before every step. People spoke softer when cops passed by. Patrol cars stopped lingering too long in certain neighborhoods. Marcus Reed had become a symbol he never asked to be. His mailbox overflowed with letters, some thanking him, some hating him. The ones that mattered most came from soldiers. Notes scrawled in rough handwriting, full of scars and silence. "You made us proud, brother. We see you. Keep fighting." He didn't reply. He just folded each letter, placed it in a shoebox under his bed, and whispered a quiet thanks to the ghosts who still wrote from memory. At night, he couldn't sleep. The city hummed outside his window, restless. He'd won a verdict but lost the comfort of anonymity. Sometimes he caught strangers filming him in grocery aisles. Kids whispered, "That's him." Adults smiled too quickly. He missed being invisible. One morning, Sarah Cruz stopped by his house, a folder under her arm. "The city council's hosting a public forum on police reform," she said. "They want you to speak." "No," Marcus said, not looking up from his coffee. "Marcus, this is your chance to shape policy. Make sure this never happens again. I'm not a politician. You're a voice people actually listen to." He leaned back. "They listen to pain, not people." "And only until the next headline," Sarah sighed. "Then give them something that lasts." He stared at her, tired. "What if I don't have anything left to give?" She didn't answer right away. "Then you let your silence do the talking. But show up. You owe it to yourself." After she left, Marcus sat for a long time, watching sunlight crawl across the floor. Maybe she was right. Maybe showing up wasn't about speeches, it was about refusing to disappear. That night he visited Darren's grave again. The Bronze Star still gleamed on the headstone. "They want me to talk," he whispered. "Feels like another battlefield." A gust of wind brushed through the trees, scattering dry leaves. "Yeah," he said softly. That's what I thought. 2 days later, he stood outside the old town hall. Cameras lined the entrance. Inside, the crowd buzzed with impatience, civilians, cops, veterans, activists. The mayor sat at the front table, hands folded, smile rehearsed. When Marcus walked in, conversations died mid-sentence. He took the podium, cleared his throat, and looked out at the sea of faces, some supportive, some skeptical, some scared. He started quietly. You all know what happened to me. You've seen the video. You've read the headlines. But I'm not here to talk about me. The room leaned in. I'm here to talk about what you didn't see. You didn't see the years that led up to that moment. The stopped cars. The searched bags. The looks that say you don't belong. The fear of fitting a description that changes depending on who's looking. He paused. The silence grew thick. You didn't see how a uniform I once wore for this country became a target on my back when I took it off. An officer in the back shifted uncomfortably. Marcus's voice steadied. I don't hate the police. I hate the silence that lets bad ones stay in power. I hate the fear that turns training into instinct and instinct into violence. I hate that we keep pretending this is new. Someone started clapping. Another joined. The mayor nodded like approval could cleanse guilt. Marcus raised a hand, stopping them. Don't clap. Just listen. The room went still again. I don't want your pity. I want your effort. I want the kind of courage it takes to stand up when the system you serve gets it wrong. Because silence doesn't make you neutral, it makes you part of the problem. He stepped back, heart pounding. A young officer stood up slowly, his voice shaky. Sir, what do you want us to do? Marcus met his eyes. Start by seeing us. Not as threats, as people. As fathers, sons, veterans, citizens. Learn our names before you learn our profiles. The officer nodded, eyes glassy. The mayor leaned forward. Mr. Reed, thank you for your words. The city pledges to review, Marcus interrupted. Pledges don't save lives. Change does, he walked off stage. Cameras followed him, but his expression didn't waver. Outside, the air was cool. Lena Brooks was waiting near the steps, notebook in hand. That was powerful, she said. I wasn't trying to be. You moved them. I didn't move them. Truth did. I just carried it here, she smiled faintly. That's what leaders do. He shook his head. Leaders give orders. I just gave them a mirror. That night, his speech aired across the country. Networks called it the silence of truth. Social feeds flooded with clips. Students quoted his words in classrooms. Officers replayed them in training seminars. But Marcus stayed home, lights dimmed, TV off. He sat by the window listening to the hum of the city shifting around him. Around midnight, someone knocked. When he opened the door, it was Daniels. His uniform was gone. Plain clothes, eyes tired. Didn't expect to see you, Marcus said. I heard your speech. And I wanted to say, you were right. Marcus studied him. About what? About silence. About fear. Daniels swallowed. I quit. Couldn't wear it anymore. Marcus stepped aside. Come in. They sat at the table, the same table where Marcus once lined up his medals. Daniels looked at them quietly. You earned all these, he said. Paid for most of them, too. I used to think men like you were stories, something they told us in training videos. But you're real, Marcus nodded. So are your mistakes. Daniels met his gaze. I can't undo what I did. No, Marcus said. But you can stop others from repeating it. Daniels nodded. I'm starting a program, training for new recruits. Mind if I quote you? Only if you understand me first. Daniels smiled faintly. I'm trying. Marcus leaned back. Then maybe that's a start. For a moment, neither spoke. The weight between them wasn't anger anymore. It was truth settling into place. As Daniels stood to leave, Marcus said quietly, You froze that day when you saw my medals. Why? Daniels hesitated at the door. Because for the first time I realized what respect looks like and how far I'd fallen from it. Marcus nodded once. Good night, officer. Just Ray now, Daniels said softly. No badge left. After he left, Marcus stood at the window again. The city lights flickered below like faint stars. Somewhere out there, maybe change had started. Slow, uncertain, but real. He looked at the medals, their reflections shimmering faintly against the glass. Guess we're not done fighting yet, he whispered. And this time, the silence that answered didn't feel like absence. It felt like promise. The days after the forum were quieter but not peaceful. Quiet in the way a storm quiets after it passes. Trees still shaking. Streets littered with what it left behind. Marcus Reed tried to slip back into a normal life. But the world wouldn't let him. Kids waved when he walked by. Veterans saluted. Strangers wanted selfies. Clerks refused his money. But beneath the gestures, he felt something else, distance. They looked at him like he wasn't one of them anymore, like he'd crossed into some moral no man's land they couldn't reach. He didn't want fame. He wanted normal. Every morning he walked to the cafe where the mural faced the police station. The paint had faded a little, rain streaking through his image. Beneath it, people left flowers, candles, flags. Some days, someone scribbled new words under the quote, "Still fighting. Never forget. See us." He'd stand there a while, hands in his pockets, before heading home. One afternoon, Lena called. "You've seen the news?" "No. They're trying to cut funding for the reform committee. The police union's pushing back hard." "Of course they are, and they said reforms are too radical," Marcus snorted. "Funny how fairness feels radical when you've never lived without it." "They're meeting tomorrow," she said. "City Hall, 9 a.m. They won't expect you to show up." "I wasn't planning to." "Then maybe that's why you should." He didn't answer, but that night he didn't sleep. He sat by the window, watching lightning blink across the sky, thinking about all the voices that never made it this far. In the morning, he put on the same dark suit from the funeral, the one that still carried the faint scent of rain and dirt and memory. At City Hall, the meeting was already in session. Rows of officials sat behind microphones, smiling the kind of smiles that hid fatigue and fear. The mayor spoke first, voice oily smooth. "While we respect Sergeant Major Reed's contribution, we must also consider fiscal responsibility. Reform must be balanced." Marcus stepped through the doors. Heads turned. The room shifted. The cameras followed him like gravity. "Mr. Reed," the mayor said, startled. "We weren't expecting—" "That's why I came," Marcus said, walking to the podium. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You're talking about balance," he said. "You're talking about numbers. Let me remind you what's being weighed." He held up his hand. "On one side, you've got comfort. On the other, you've got lives." "Which one's heavier?" No one answered. "I didn't ask for this fight," he said. "But if you're tired of hearing about injustice, imagine how tired people are of living it." The mayor shifted in his seat. "Mr. Reed, this is a fiscal hearing. It's a moral one," Marcus interrupted. "You can't balance a budget on the back of dignity." Murmurs spread through the room. A councilwoman raised her hand. "Mr. Reed, with respect, reform takes time." "We can't rebuild overnight," Marcus nodded slowly. "Neither can the families of those buried because rebuilding was delayed." Silence, he stepped back. "You all have decisions to make. I already made mine. I stood still once and it changed something. Maybe it'll change something again." He turned and walked out. Outside, a crowd had gathered. Lena was among them, camera rolling. "What did you say in there?" she asked. "Enough." The clip hit the evening news before sunset. It was raw, unpolished. Marcus's voice steady, the officials' faces shifting with unease. The story reignited the fire. Protests returned, peaceful but firm. College students marched downtown. Churches opened their doors for dialogues between officers and citizens, and slowly the tide turned again. 3 weeks later, the council voted reforms. It began with a phone call from Washington. Marcus Reed was washing dishes when the phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, then answered. Mr. Reed, this is Deputy Director Evans from the Department of Justice. We'd like to invite you to testify before Congress. The committee is reviewing police reform across the nation. Your experience could guide the conversation. Marcus wiped his hands on a towel. You want me to be your poster boy? We want your perspective, Evans said carefully. You represent what the system needs to hear. Marcus looked out the window. The mural across the street shimmered in the afternoon light. I've said enough. Maybe. But sometimes truth needs to echo before it's heard. He hung up without answering. That night he sat on his porch, staring into the quiet. The city had changed, new training programs, community events, dialogues, but deep down he knew it wasn't finished. The next morning, Lena stopped by. She held a folder. They called me too, she said. They want to use footage from the trial for the hearing. Marcus didn't look up. Let them. They want you there, Marcus. Live, not just video. He shook his head. I'm done being their lesson plan. She stepped closer. Maybe it's not for them. Maybe it's for us. He met her eyes, tired but steady. You sound like Sarah. She's right. You've started something. Don't stop now. He didn't reply. 3 days later, a letter arrived on official stationery. The seal of the U.S. Senate gleamed at the top. The words were formal, almost sterile. Your testimony is requested before the Committee on Civil Justice Reform. He stared at the letter for a long time. Then he packed a bag. The Capitol smelled of marble and old power. Cameras lined the halls, waiting like wolves. As Marcus walked toward the chamber, he caught sight of his reflection in the glass doors. Tired eyes. Straight. This committee. What would it be? Marcus looked at each of them in turn. Stop studying racism like... The months that followed were louder than Marcus ever wanted. His name was now a movement. The Reed Act passed. The media called him a voice for the voiceless. Politicians quoted him. Activists wore shirts with his face. School children recited his words for essay contests, and Marcus hated every second of it. He didn't ask to be a symbol. He just wanted to bury his friend. But symbols don't get to rest. His phone never stopped buzzing, speaking invitations, interviews, endorsements. He ignored most of them. The few he accepted, he kept brief. Words were weapons now, and he used them carefully. One morning, Sarah dropped by with a newspaper. "Your front page again," she said. He didn't look up from his coffee. "That's not news anymore. They're calling you the conscience of America." Marcus snorted. "That means they'll forget me next week. You've done more than most people ever will." He shook his head. "No, I just stood still long enough for the world to trip over its own blindness." Sarah smiled softly. "You can be bitter and right at the same time, you know." "I'm not bitter," he said quietly. "Just tired." She sat down. "Then take a break." "From what?" "Breathing?" She looked at him, concern tightening her face. "You've been carrying this too long." He said nothing. That evening he went walking. The mural still faced the police station, now protected by glass panels and spotlights. Tourists took photos. A plaque beneath it read, "Sergeant Major Marcus Reed, Truth in Silence." He stared at it until the streetlights flickered on. A voice came from behind him. "Looks just like you." He turned. Lena stood there, camera hanging from her shoulder. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said. "I was covering a story nearby. Thought I'd stop by the landmark." "Landmark," he repeated, shaking his head. "Guess I'm history now." She studied him. "You don't sound proud." "I'm not art. I'm a man who got lucky enough not to die on camera." Lena sighed. "You don't get to control what people take from it. You gave them hope." "I gave them a reminder," Marcus said. "Hope's what they built around it to feel better." They stood in silence for a while, the city breathing around them. Lena broke it. "How's Daniels?" "Haven't seen him in months. He's running a training program now. The videos went viral. Perception versus reality. Kids watch them in academies." Marcus nodded. "Good. You could join him, you know. Teach." "I'm not a teacher. You already are." He didn't reply. When she left, Marcus lingered by the mural until the night emptied the streets. The reflection of the painted face looked back at him through the glass. Same eyes. Same posture, but somehow older, he whispered. "You got famous, but you don't look happy." The painted man didn't answer. Weeks turned into months. The attention began to fade, replaced by new crises, new headlines. Another city. Another video. The same pain. Every time it happened, Marcus's phone filled with messages. "Can you comment? Can you speak? Can you lead the protest?" He stopped replying. He started fixing things around the neighborhood instead. Volunteering at the youth center, painting fences, helping veterans with paperwork. It was quieter work, real work. One afternoon, while repairing a bench outside the center, a boy approached. He couldn't have been older than 13. "You're Marcus Reed, right?" Marcus nodded. "My dad says you're why he stopped drinking. Said you made him see himself different." Marcus paused, then smiled faintly. "Your dad's a strong man. He says you're stronger. Then tell him he's wrong." The boy grinned and ran off. Marcus watched him go, a warmth flickering somewhere deep inside. For the first time in months, he felt like he'd done something small enough to matter. That evening, Sarah called again. "They're honoring you next month. National ceremony. Medals, speeches, the works. I have enough medals. It's the president, Marcus." He sighed. "I fought for the country. Not for a photo with it. Then go for the soldiers who never got one." The line went quiet. He finally said, "Send me the details." The ceremony was in DC, flags everywhere. Cameras, reporters, senators in expensive suits. Marcus stood in a sea of applause that didn't feel real. The president pinned a medal to his chest and whispered, "Your courage reminded us what justice looks like." Marcus replied, "Justice doesn't need reminding. It needs protecting." The president nodded politely, not sure what to say. When the cameras flashed, Marcus smiled for exactly 1 second, just long enough to be polite. After the ceremony, he slipped out a side door. The crowd never noticed. He found himself walking through the National Mall, the monuments glowing in the dusk. Tourists laughed. Joggers passed. He stopped near the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Names stretched endlessly across the black stone, shining under the soft lights. He ran a hand over the wall. So many names. Too many. Hey, a voice said. He turned. Daniels was there. Older, thinner, dressed plain. Didn't think I'd see you here, Marcus said. I was nearby, Daniels replied. Heard about your medal. Another one for the pile. Daniels smiled weakly. You deserve it. No one deserves a medal for surviving racism. They stood in silence for a while, watching the lights reflect on the wall. Daniels spoke first. I used to think redemption was saying sorry loud enough. Turns out it's living different, Marcus nodded. You're doing that. I'm trying. My daughter joined the academy. Said she wants to change it from the inside. Marcus smiled faintly. Sounds like she's braver than both of us. Daniels chuckled. Probably. They stood there as night deepened. Finally, Daniels said, You know that day at the funeral, I still see it. Every time I close my eyes, Marcus looked at him. Good, don't ever forget it. Memory's what keeps us honest. Daniels nodded. You still angry? Marcus thought for a long time. No, just aware. Daniels extended his hand. Then thank you, Marcus shook it. For what? For not giving up on me. Marcus didn't answer. They stood there, two men framed by names of the dead, the kind of silence that didn't hurt anymore. As Daniels walked away, Marcus looked back at the wall. He whispered, We're still fighting, brothers. Just a different kind of war now, and for the first time he didn't feel alone. Fame faded the way seasons change, quietly without warning. One morning, Marcus Reed woke up and realized the world had stopped calling his name. The mural still stood, but the candles beneath it were gone. The news channels had moved on to newer scandals, fresher tragedies. The city had healed just enough to forget. He didn't mind. He'd wanted silence. But silence, when it finally came, felt heavier than noise. He filled his days with small work, mentoring kids, fixing fences, visiting the cemetery. He taught them how to stand tall without anger and how to walk away without shame. It helped. Some days. Other days, the ghosts came back. He'd wake in the middle of the night, sweat cold on his skin, hearing the bugle again, the sound from the funeral, that endless note that wouldn't fade. Sometimes he saw Darren's coffin, sometimes the officer's hand reaching for his gun, sometimes both. One evening he found himself driving aimlessly, ending up at the edge of town near the river. The water moved slow and dark, like time refusing to hurry. He sat on the hood of his truck listening to the crickets. For the first time in years he whispered a prayer. Lord, I don't know what winning looks like anymore. I just hope it means peace. The river answered with nothing but ripples. A voice startled him. You still talk to ghosts, huh? It was Lena. She carried a small camera bag, her hair pulled back, smile faint but real. Thought you quit journalism, he said. Couldn't, she replied. Truth doesn't retire, he smiled. Neither does pain. She joined him on the hood. I'm doing a documentary. Not about the case, about what comes after. You okay if I ask you a few things? He shrugged. Ask. She turned on the recorder. Do you feel justice was served? Marcus looked at the water. Justice doesn't serve, it visits. Sometimes it stays for coffee, most times it leaves before sunrise. Do you regret any of it? He thought for a long moment. Regret's tricky. I regret that Darren died. I regret that it took handcuffs for people to see a soldier. But me, no, I stood my ground. That's all a man can do, Lena nodded. What's life like now? He chuckled softly. Quieter. The world's always louder when you're angry. Do you ever wish you'd stayed invisible? All the time, he said. But then I meet some kid who says he wants to be a cop because he saw me forgive one. So maybe visibility's the price of change. She switched off the recorder. You ever think about writing a book? Marcus smiled faintly. The world already wrote it. I just lived the pages. They sat in silence. The sky bled orange into violet. Lena leaned back, watching the sunset. You know, she said, the first time I filmed you, I thought you were the angriest man I'd ever met. I was, he admitted. Then I realized anger is just love that ran out of places to go. She looked at him for a long time. That's the line I'll end my film with, he laughed quietly. You always did steal my best lines. Later that week, Marcus received a letter from the Department of Veterans Affairs. They were naming a new community center after him, the Reed Cole Veterans Hall. He stared at the paper, unsure how to feel. He drove to the site. Construction crews were painting the sign. He met the director, a woman with sharp eyes and calloused hands. "We wanted to honor both you and Corporal Cole," she said. "Your story changed how people see veterans of color. You gave us a blueprint." Marcus walked through the half-built hall. Empty rooms, fresh paint, new beginnings. "Blueprints are just lines," he said. "It's what people build on them that matters," she smiled. "Then we'll build something good," he nodded. "Make sure it stays open to everyone, soldiers, kids, even cops." Her smile widened. "That's the point." Before he left, she asked, "Will you speak at the opening?" He hesitated. "I'm not much for speeches." "Then just stand there. Sometimes presence is louder than words." He considered that. "All right, I'll stand." That night he sat at the table sorting old medals. Some were scratched, some bent. He set aside one, the bronze star he'd placed on Darren's grave years ago. He'd replaced it with a replica, but this one carried a weight that couldn't be duplicated. He traced its edges with his thumb. A knock came at the door. Sarah stood there holding a small box. "Got this in the mail," she said. "Addressed to you." Inside was a folded flag and a note. "From the Academy. Class of 2025, we learned from your story. Thank you for seeing us before we learned to see ourselves." Marcus stared at it. For the first time in a long while, his eyes watered. He looked up at Sarah. "They'll be better than we were." She smiled softly. "That's the point of living long enough to teach." He nodded, voice barely above a whisper. "Then I guess I'm still teaching." The day of the opening came. The crowd filled the new hall. Veterans, officers, students, families. The mayor gave a long speech. Then they called Marcus forward. He walked slowly to the podium, the folded flag in his hands. The room went quiet. He didn't give a speech. He didn't need one. He simply unfolded the flag, held it up, and said, "This belongs to all of us. So does the truth." Applause thundered through the hall. Cameras flashed, but his eyes found something else. A wall of photos behind him. Portraits of veterans from every background, every shade. Darren's face among them. He placed the bronze star beneath his friend's picture. "We made it, brother," he whispered. Not all the way, but farther than we were. After the ceremony, a young recruit approached him. "Sir, what do we do now?" Marcus smiled. "Keep walking. Justice doesn't have finish lines." The recruit saluted. As Marcus left the hall, the sky broke open with light rain, soft and steady. He tilted his head up, letting it wash over him. For the first time in years, the rain didn't remind him of that funeral. It reminded him of growth. He whispered to the wind, "Guess it's finally washing clean." The world, quiet but awake, seemed to whisper back, "Keep standing." Winter came slow that year. Frost traced the edges of windows, turning the city into glass. The Reed Cole Veterans Hall was open now, warm light spilling onto the snow-covered street each night. Inside, laughter mixed with the low hum of stories being retold for the 100th time. Marcus Reed came every Friday. He never announced himself. He'd just sit at the back, sip coffee from a paper cup, and listen. Sometimes the speakers were young soldiers fresh home from deployments. Sometimes they were cops from Daniel's program, learning to see beyond fear. Sometimes they were kids from the neighborhood, shy but brave, reading poems about equality. Marcus liked those nights best. They reminded him why he'd kept going. One Friday, the director approached him. "We're expanding," she said. "Youth scholarship fund, mentorship programs, even counseling. It's becoming bigger than we imagined." "That's good," Marcus said. She hesitated. "We want to name the main hall after you." He shook his head. "Name it after all of them. The ones who never got a headline." She smiled. "You're consistent, Mr. Reed." "Consistency's easier than glory," he said. Later that night, as he locked the doors, he heard laughter outside. A group of teenagers were building snowmen in the parking lot, their breath rising like smoke. One of them waved. "Mr. Reed, you coming to the game tomorrow?" He frowned playfully. "What game?" "Our team's playing the Academy champs. You promised last time you'd come watch." He chuckled. "Guess I did. Front row seat waiting for you," the boy shouted. Marcus smiled. "Then I'll be there." As they ran off into the cold, he stood a moment watching their footprints fade in the snow. A thought crossed his mind. Maybe this was what victory really looked like. Kids laughing in a world that once looked at them with suspicion. The next morning, he went to the game. The gym smelled like popcorn and sneakers and joy. Parents cheered, whistles blew, and for a few hours the world seemed normal. During halftime, Daniels walked up beside him. "Didn't think basketball was your thing," Daniels said. "It's not," Marcus replied. "But peace and noise together? That's new." Daniels laughed. "The academy invited me too. Wanted me to see how our cadets volunteer here now. Times really are changing." "Change never comes easy," Marcus said. "But it sticks when it's earned." Daniels nodded. "My daughter's here today. She's coaching the other team." Marcus grinned. "So I'm supposed to cheer for you or her?" "Her. Always her." They both laughed, something that had once seemed impossible. When the game ended, the local team won by a single point. The crowd erupted. Marcus clapped slowly, smiling as the kids lifted the trophy. Daniel's daughter spotted them and jogged over, sweat shining on her forehead. "Mr. Reed," she said, catching her breath. "I just wanted to say, thank you. My dad told me everything. I joined because of what you taught him." Marcus nodded. "Then keep teaching him," she grinned. "Yes, sir." Daniels put an arm around her shoulder. "Proud of her," he said quietly. "You should be," Marcus replied. "She's what redemption looks like." The following week, Marcus received a letter from a college in Georgia. A professor wanted permission to include his case in a course on ethics and social change. He wrote back, "Use it, but tell them it's not a story about a cop and a veteran. It's a story about a country learning to look at itself." He never heard back, but that was fine. He'd said what needed saying. Spring melted the snow. The city bloomed again. The mural, now protected by glass, had faded at the edges, but someone had painted new lines, children's faces beside his. Hands lifted, eyes bright. One afternoon, a bus pulled up. Tourists stepped out, snapping pictures. One woman approached Marcus, who was sweeping the hall's front steps. "Excuse me," she said. "You look just like the man in the mural." He smiled. "I get that a lot. Were you in the army?" He nodded. She tilted her head. "You proud of what you did?" He thought for a second. "Proud I kept standing. That's enough." She smiled politely, not recognizing him at all, and walked away. When she left, Marcus laughed softly. For the first time, being forgotten didn't sting. It felt like freedom. That summer, the city hosted a parade to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the Reed Act. Marcus didn't plan to attend, but the community insisted. "You started this," they said. He stood near the back, no uniform, no stage. Just another face in the crowd. Bands played. Veterans marched. Officers from Daniels' program carried banners that read, "See before you judge." Children waved flags painted with his quote, "Silence feeds the beast." Daniels found him near the end of the parade. "Didn't think you'd show," he said. "I didn't come for the noise," Marcus replied. "Came to see the walking proof," Daniels grinned. "You know, they want to build another center down south this time." "Good, keep building. You gonna help design it?" Marcus chuckled. "I'm retired from saving the world," Daniels smirked. "World's still calling." Marcus looked at the parade, the faces, the laughter, the unity, and said, "Then maybe it finally learned my number." That evening, as fireworks lit the sky, Marcus sat alone on his porch, coffee in hand. The bursts reflected in the metal still hanging on the wall. "Glinting like tiny suns," he whispered. "You'd like this, Darren." The breeze rustled the trees. His phone buzzed, a message from Lena. "Premiere tonight. Documentary's done. You should see it." He hesitated, then grabbed his coat. The theater was full. On the screen his face appeared, the funeral, the trial, the speeches, the silence. The film ended with Lena's voice. "Some heroes shout. Some heroes stand still. And sometimes standing still shakes the world." The audience stood and clapped. Marcus didn't. He just sat there, letting the sound wash over him. Lena found him afterward. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "You made it look bigger than it felt." "That's cinema," she said. He smiled. "Yeah, but the truth's quieter." They walked out together into the night, on the marquee under bright lights. The film's title read, "Still Standing, the Marcus Reed Story." He stared at it for a moment, then turned away. "Let them watch. I've got living to do." The city hummed around him, alive, imperfect, changing. He walked down the street toward the hall, the lights behind him fading into the dark. And for the first time in a long, long while, he felt completely, peacefully ordinary. Time moved differently for Marcus Reed now. The days were slower, gentler. The noise had passed, leaving behind something that felt almost like peace. He was older, gray at the temples, lines deeper around his eyes, but still strong. He walked every morning to the Reed Cole Veterans Hall, greeting the kids, shaking hands with old soldiers, talking quietly with officers from Daniel's program. Everyone called him Mr. Reed now, like a grandfather who belonged to everyone. But his body was changing. The stairs winded him. His hands shook sometimes when he poured his coffee. He'd laugh it off, age catching up, that's all. But inside he felt a shadow forming, slow and certain. He didn't fear it. He'd seen too much to fear endings. One afternoon during a youth workshop, he lost his balance. The room fell silent as he caught himself on the podium. "You okay, sir?" a young cadet asked. Marcus smiled faintly. Still standing. Laughter broke the tension, but Sarah Cruz, sitting in the back, saw his hand trembling. After the session, she pulled him aside. "You need to see a doctor." "I'm fine, Marcus." He sighed. "All right, tomorrow." The doctor's office smelled of antiseptic and quiet truths. Tests, scans, waiting rooms. When the results came back, the doctor spoke gently. "Your heart's weak, Mr. Reed. Years of stress. You'll need rest, less travel." Marcus chuckled. "Doc, I've been resting my whole life between battles." The doctor didn't smile. "You don't have many battles left to fight." Marcus nodded. "Then I'll make them count." That night, he sat on his porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city lights blink like tired stars. Lena Brooks stopped by, camera bag slung over her shoulder. "Long time since I saw you sitting still," she said. "Doctor's orders," he replied. "You look good." "Liar." She laughed. "You're still the same man I met at that funeral." He looked at her. "No, that man was angry. This one's just grateful." She sat beside him. "I'm doing a follow-up film 10 years later. How the movement changed, did it?" She hesitated. "A little." "Change doesn't come easy." "Good," he said. "Easy change never lasts." She turned her camera off. "You ever think about what comes next?" He stared into the dark. "Every day. Scared?" He shook his head. "Just curious." Weeks passed. Marcus slowed down but didn't stop. He still visited schools, still met with veterans, still wrote letters to young officers. One morning, he received a visit from Ray Daniels. "Been a while," Daniels said, stepping inside. "Thought you forgot where I lived?" "Never." Daniels looked older too, softer around the eyes. "Heard about the heart. Guess word travels faster than health." Daniels sat down. "You need anything?" Marcus smiled. "You already gave me what I needed, a future that looks different." Daniels nodded. "The program's grown. Half the state uses our model now. My daughter's a captain. Tell her I said to aim higher. She already does." They sat quietly for a while. Two men once divided by fear, now joined by respect. "You know," Daniel said, "they still teach about that day at the funeral. New recruits watch it every year." Marcus looked down. "You ever watch it?" "Once a year," Daniel said. "To remember who I don't want to be." Marcus smiled faintly. "That's enough." Spring arrived again. The city bloomed with color. Marcus spent his afternoons at the Veterans Hall reading stories to kids. One boy, maybe 10, asked, "Mr. Reed, is it true you got arrested at a funeral?" Marcus chuckled. "True. Were you scared?" He thought for a moment. "No, but I was sad that a uniform couldn't protect me from ignorance." The boy frowned. "What's ignorance?" Marcus leaned forward. "It's when someone decides what you are before you tell them." The boy nodded slowly, as if filing it away for later. "Then what's courage?" he asked. "Courage," Marcus said softly, "is standing anyway." That night Marcus couldn't sleep. The old ache in his chest returned, sharper now. He sat at the table staring at his medals. Each one was a story, a scar, a ghost. He picked up the bronze star, the one from Darren's grave, and whispered, "We did all right, brother." The next morning, Sarah found him at the hall, sitting in his usual chair by the window, sunlight on his face. His coffee was still warm. His eyes were closed, he looked peaceful. The city mourned. Flags lowered again. Crowds gathered at the mural. Flowers, candles, folded flags lined the sidewalk. The mayor declared a day of remembrance. News anchors replayed clips of his speeches. Lena's documentary aired that night, retitled Still Standing: The Final March. It ended with footage of Marcus at the Veterans Hall, telling the boy about courage. Her voice closed the film. Some men fight wars overseas. Some fight them in silence at home. Marcus Reed taught us that dignity can be louder than violence, and that sometimes the quietest man leaves the loudest echo. Across the country, people watched in silence at his funeral. Thousands gathered, soldiers, officers, children, strangers. Daniel spoke first. "I once put handcuffs on a hero," he said, voice trembling. "He forgave me before I forgave myself. He taught me what sight really means," Lena spoke next. "He never chased power. He made truth powerful," Sarah added softly. "He showed us that justice isn't about punishment, it's about presence." Then came the boy from the hall. He stepped up to the podium, holding a crayon drawing of Marcus. He told me courage was standing, so I'll stand, and he did, tall, trembling, but unbroken. The crowd rose with him, thousands standing still. No sound, no music. Just silence, his favorite kind of tribute. The bugle played. The flag folded, and when the wind moved through the trees, it sounded like a whisper, still standing. Later that night, Lena walked alone past the mural. Someone had painted new words beneath it. He didn't change the world. He reminded it to look. She smiled through tears. "Goodbye, Marcus." As she walked away, a little girl tugged her mother's hand and pointed at the mural. "Mom, who's that man?" Her mother smiled softly. "That's the man who taught the world how to stand still." The girl nodded, eyes wide. "Then I'll stand too." And just like that, the legacy continued. Quiet, simple, unstoppable. Years passed. The city changed its skin again. New buildings rose where old ones crumbled, and the Reed Cole Veterans Hall became something like a heartbeat for the town. Children played outside its gates, unaware that the ground beneath them had once been soaked in protest and prayer. Marcus Reed's name lived quietly now. Not shouted, not debated, remembered. The mural still stood, though the paint had faded, cracked by seasons. Every few years, volunteers restored it. Not because anyone told them to, but because they wanted to keep the silence alive. The silence that once made the world listen. Inside the hall, a small museum had formed over time. Medals, photos, handwritten letters, and one glass case with his old jacket folded neatly inside. The plaque read, "He stood still, and the world moved." It was a crisp autumn morning when Elijah Brooks, Lena's teenage son, visited the hall for a school project. He wore headphones, camera in hand, eyes full of that restless curiosity his mother once carried. The curator, an older woman named Mrs. Hill, smiled at him. "You're the documentary kid, right?" Elijah grinned. "Guess I am. Mom says I got it honest." She led him through the exhibits. "Your mother filmed most of this. You know that, don't you?" "Yeah," he said, running a hand along a framed newspaper clipping. "She told me he never liked cameras." Mrs. Hill chuckled. "No, he didn't. But he understood what truth looked like when it stared back." Elijah stopped in front of the glass case. "That's the jacket?" "The one from the funeral," she said softly. "Still smells like rain." He leaned closer. The rows of medals glimmered faintly under the light. "He must have been heavy to carry all that." "He was," Mrs. Hill replied. "In every way." Elijah pulled out his small camera. "Mind if I film?" "Only if you promise to listen, not just record." He smiled. "Deal." Later that day he visited the cemetery. The sun hung low, warm but dying. He found the grave easily, flowers still fresh, small flags fluttering. The inscription read, "Sergeant Major Marcus Reed, 1969 to 2045. Still standing. Elijah set his camera on the grass and began to speak softly into it. "My mom says heroes are just people who do the right thing long enough for someone to notice. I never met you, Mr. Reed, but I think you'd hate that I'm filming this." He smiled faintly. "Thing is, your story's still saving people. My friend Malik got stopped last year. The officer recognized his school badge from the Reed Act scholarship. Let him go with an apology." Elijah looked up at the sky. "Guess you're still standing after all." He turned off the camera and sat there a while, the kind of silence that feels like prayer. Back in town, Lena watched the news. 10 years since Marcus's death, and the country was still wrestling with his ghost. New cases, new debates, old wounds. But change, slow and stubborn, was happening. She had gray in her hair now, but her voice remained steady. She spoke at universities, telling students how truth wasn't something you shouted. It was something you lived until others had to hear it. That evening, Elijah came home, dust on his shoes, eyes bright. "You went to the hall?" she asked. He nodded. "And the cemetery," she smiled. "What did you see?" He thought for a moment. A man who didn't need to speak to make noise. Lena's throat tightened. "Then you saw him right." He showed her the footage, the jacket, the medals, the grave. Her eyes glistened. "Mom," he said quietly, "I want to finish your story. A new documentary. Not about what happened, but what came after." She looked at him proud. "Then make it real. No speeches. Just truth." Months later, Elijah's film premiered online. After the silence the world Marcus Reed left behind. It wasn't flashy. No dramatic music, just voices. Officers, students, mothers, veterans. All talking about how one man's calm had reshaped their choices. A young officer in the film said, "We don't get trained out of fear overnight. But every time I hesitate, I hear his voice. See before you judge. That's enough to make me breathe." Another voice, an older woman, said, "He made us look in the mirror. And we didn't like what we saw, but we didn't turn away either." The film spread quietly at first, then widely. Within a week, it was being shown in schools, academies, even churches. It wasn't about Marcus anymore. It was about the reflection he left behind. One night after a screening, Lena and Elijah walked home through the park. The sky was clear, the air crisp. "You did him justice," she said. He shrugged. "I didn't want to make him perfect. Just human." That's exactly who he was. They stopped by the new monument near the square, a bronze statue, modest in size. Marcus stood in his suit, hands clasped in front of him, eyes forward. No weapon, no anger, just stillness. On the base were 4 words: stand, see, learn, change. Elijah read them aloud. "You think people still listen?" Lena looked at the statue. "Maybe not every day, but some days when it matters," he nodded. "That's enough, right?" "It has to be." They stood there for a long moment. Across the country, other halls began to open. Reed centers in cities where tension had once ruled the streets. They taught conflict resolution, empathy, and community leadership. In one of them, Daniel's daughter, now Captain Daniels, led a session with new recruits. On the wall behind her hung a quote, "Silence feeds the beast," she pointed to it. "He said those words the year I joined. My father used to quote him after every training. Now it's our oath." An officer in the back raised his hand.
"Captain, do you think we'll ever be done fighting this?"
She smiled. "When everyone stands without needing permission." Back in Marcus's city, the Veterans Hall glowed with evening light. Inside, a new generation gathered. Children whose parents once watched him on screens, learning now from stories, not news. Mrs. Hill lit a candle beneath his portrait. "He's still here," she said softly. "In every quiet decision someone makes to do better." A little girl tugged her sleeve. "Miss Hill, why's he standing so still in all the pictures?" Mrs. Hill knelt beside her. "Because stillness was his strength," the girl thought, then nodded seriously. "Then I want to stand like that too." And she did. Small feet planted, chin lifted. Hands folded just like the man in the picture. The room filled with laughter, soft and proud. Outside, the night wind moved through the trees, carrying a whisper over the city that had once doubted, once feared, and now quietly remembered. It said only 2 words, still standing. 10 years after Elijah's film, the world looked different on the surface, but Marcus Reed's shadow still stretched across it. Cities now had Reed programs in their academies. Officers took empathy courses before learning to shoot. Schools taught about the day of the funeral, the way they once taught the March on Washington. But progress, like peace, was fragile. Headlines spoke of new divisions, technology replacing jobs, protests over surveillance, politics splitting neighbors again. The country that Marcus helped awaken was, once more, forgetting to listen. Lena Brooks was older now, her hair silver, her voice slower but still sharp. She lived in a small apartment near the Memorial Square. Most nights she sat by the window, watching young activists gather beneath the bronze statue. Sometimes she smiled. Other times she worried. That spring, her son Elijah received an invitation from the President's Cultural Council. They wanted him to produce a national campaign called The American Mirror. Its goal, remind people of what justice looked like in human form. He stared at the letter, uneasy. He called his mother. They want Marcus again, he said. They always will, Lena replied. Truth's the only thing they can't trademark. I don't want to turn him into marketing. Then don't, she said. Turn him into memory. A month later, Elijah found himself in Washington. The same Capitol where Marcus once testified looked cleaner, shinier, but the ghosts were still there. Inside a long marble hallway, portraits of leaders lined the walls. He noticed none of them looked like Marcus. Maybe that was the point. He met Secretary Evans, now older and slower. The same man who'd once invited Marcus to speak. Mr. Brooks, Evans said, shaking his hand. This initiative could unite the country again. We need Marcus Reed's message. We need stillness in the noise. Elijah looked at him. You need a symbol. Evans sighed. Symbols move nations. Sometimes they also silence people who keep fighting, Elijah said. Evans frowned. You sound like him. Good, Elijah replied. Means I'm listening. That night, Elijah walked alone through the empty mall. He stopped at the Veterans Memorial, the same wall where Marcus once stood with Daniels. He set up his camera, pressed record. My name's Elijah Brooks, he said softly. I grew up in the world Marcus Reed built, and maybe we broke it again. He paused, letting the wind fill the silence. People say progress is a straight line. It's not. It's a heartbeat. It rises, it falls, and every time it stops, someone like Marcus reminds us to breathe again. He stopped the recording. No script, no music. Just truth. The campaign launched 3 months later, not with slogans, but with short clips filmed in ordinary places. A nurse holding a patient's hand. A teacher breaking up a fight without raising her voice. A police cadet pausing before drawing his weapon. Each clip ended with the same line spoken quietly. Still standing, the video spread faster than anyone expected. Hashtags appeared, not angry this time, grateful. Old soldiers wrote letters. Teenagers painted murals in new cities. For a brief moment, the country exhaled. One morning, Lena received a call from the White House. Mrs. Brooks, said a staffer. The president would like you and your son to attend a ceremony. We're dedicating the Marcus Reed Peace Garden. She hesitated. He hated ceremonies. Yes, ma'am. That's why we're planting trees instead of building walls. She smiled. Then he'd approve. The day of the ceremony was warm and clear. Crowds lined the pathways near the Potomac. Elijah carried his camera. Lena carried a single sunflower. The president spoke briefly. Marcus Reed taught us that justice begins in silence. Today we let that silence grow. Then the microphone was passed to Lena. She took a breath, her voice steady. He never wanted to be remembered for what was done to him, she said. He wanted to be remembered for what he refused to stop doing, standing. So if you came here for a hero, you're missing the lesson. He wasn't a hero. He was a mirror. Look in it. The crowd fell silent. Somewhere a bird sang. Elijah lowered his camera, unable to film the tears in his eyes. That evening, mother and son sat beside the reflecting pool. The sky blazed orange. You did good today, she said. So did you. He glanced at the water. Mom, what if all this fades again? What if people forget like before? She smiled sadly. Then someone new will remember. That's how truth survives, by changing hands. He nodded. I think I'm ready to make another film. What about? About the next Marcus Reed, whoever they are. She squeezed his hand. Then you better start looking. Months passed. Elijah traveled across the country, visiting communities shaped by the Reed Act. In Detroit, a police captain quoted Marcus before every roll call. In Dallas, a classroom of third graders recited his words every morning. Stand before you speak. But in some places, he saw backlash too. New fear, new hate dressed in old language. People arguing that the reforms went too far. Progress always made someone uncomfortable. At night, in hotel rooms, he'd replay Marcus's interviews, his speeches, his silences. He noticed something he hadn't before. Marcus never preached. He asked, and the asking did the work. One day, in a small southern town, Elijah met a teenage girl named Ari Reed, Marcus's grandniece. She wore a denim jacket and spoke like thunder. You're him, right? The guy from the films? She asked. Yeah, Elijah said. Your family? Maybe. My grandma said Marcus Reed was my uncle's cousin or something. I read about him. That man didn't just stand still, he made the world trip. Elijah laughed. That's one way to put it. She leaned forward. I'm going to be a lawyer. Not for fame, for fairness. He studied her, the fire in her eyes, the steadiness in her voice. You sound like him. Then maybe it runs in the blood, she said. You gonna film me too? Maybe, he said. But first I think you'll write your own story. She grinned. Already started. Back home, Elijah edited his footage. On the screen, faces from every corner of the country appeared. Old, young, uniformed, free. Over them he layered Marcus's voice from an old interview. I didn't want the world to love me. I wanted it to see itself. Just once. When the final frame faded, Elijah whispered, It's seeing you now. He uploaded the film. No marketing. No campaign. Just a quiet release. Within days, millions watched. Not because it shouted, but because it reminded them how to listen. That night, the bronze statue of Marcus Reed gleamed under moonlight. The engraved words seemed to breathe, stand, see, learn, change. A breeze moved through the garden, rustling the leaves of the young trees planted in his name. They whispered softly, like applause that didn't need an audience. And somewhere in the hum of the sleeping city, truth stirred again, stretching its limbs, ready for another dawn. Still standing. 5 years later, the country had changed again. Not in revolutions, but in rhythms. Technology had swallowed everything, news, truth, lies, turning them all into static. The world scrolled faster than it listened. And yet, in the middle of that noise, Ari Reed was building something quiet. She was 27 now, a defense attorney in Atlanta, with a reputation for impossible cases. Her voice was calm in court, her tone clipped and deliberate like Marcus's, but her eyes burned brighter. Elijah Brooks had followed her story for months, filming discreetly. He'd found in her what he'd been searching for, the continuation of a legacy that refused to fade. On a humid August morning, he met her outside the courthouse. She was holding a paper cup of coffee, her sleeves rolled up. You ever stop working? He asked. Justice doesn't, she said. He smiled. You sound like your uncle. She shrugged. Never met him, but I've heard the recordings. He sounded tired. He was, Elijah said. But he kept standing. Ari looked at him. Standing's not enough anymore. People sit behind screens now. You have to reach through them. Her latest case was brutal. An unarmed teenager shot by private security outside a tech campus. The company claimed protocol, the city claimed tragedy, and social media claimed everything else. Ari claimed the truth. In the courtroom, she didn't shout. She asked questions that cut deeper than anger. When you saw him, did you see a weapon? She asked the guard. He hesitated. No. Then what did you see? He looked down. Someone out of place. Out of place, she repeated. Isn't that what they said about my uncle at a funeral once? The room went still. Cameras clicked. She turned to the jury. The law can't bring him back, but it can stop pretending blindness is sight. When she sat down, Elijah exhaled. The words echoed Marcus's, reshaped but alive. The verdict came 3 days later. Guilty. The courtroom erupted in gasps. The victim's mother sobbed into Ari's shoulder. Reporters shouted questions. Ari said only one thing. Justice isn't revenge, it's correction. That clip flooded every screen in the country. Within days, it had millions of views. Lena called Elijah that night. She's him, she said. No, Elijah replied. She's what comes after him. Weeks later, Ari was invited to speak at the National Forum on Ethics and Technology in D.C., the same building where Marcus once testified. She walked those marble halls with steady steps, a small pin of his silhouette on her lapel. When it was her turn, she stood at the podium and looked at the crowd. Politicians, scientists, CEOs, activists. My uncle taught a country to stand still, she began. But stillness won't save us anymore. The world doesn't wait, it scrolls. So if silence once changed us, attention has to now. She paused. Algorithms decide who gets seen, who gets heard, who gets blamed. The next battle for justice won't be in the streets. It'll be in the code. The audience leaned forward. I'm not afraid of machines, she said. I'm afraid of the people who teach them to copy our bias. Her voice sharpened. We can't ask the future to be fair if we keep feeding it our prejudice. So the question isn't who controls the truth. It's whether we'll recognize it when it stares back. The room erupted in applause, some real, some performative. Ari didn't care which. She had said what needed saying. Afterward, Elijah found her backstage. "You know you just started another movement, right?" She smirked. "Good. It's about time the next one spoke fluent data." He laughed. "You planning to lead it?" She shook her head. "I'm just standing again. Same family habit." That night, Elijah edited footage from her speech. He layered Marcus's voice beneath her words, the deep, calm tone from decades earlier. "The fight doesn't end when people stop hating you. It ends when they start understanding you." Then Ari's voice answered, "Understanding isn't enough. We have to rewrite the systems that forgot us." The clip went viral within hours. The new generation called it the dialogue. Months later, Ari visited the old city where Marcus was buried. The Veterans Hall was bigger now, with solar roofs and digital archives. She met Mrs. Hill, now frail but alert. "You look just like him," Mrs. Hill whispered. Ari smiled. "I hope I sound different." They walked through the museum together. The old jacket was still in its glass case, metals lined like quiet thunder. "He carried these for the world," Ari said. Mrs. Hill nodded. "And you're carrying the world for him." Ari touched the glass gently. "Maybe it's lighter now." Outside, she sat on the steps with Elijah. The air was warm, cicadas humming. "You ever think he'd like where we ended up?" she asked. Elijah looked out at the street, the laughter of children, the mixed uniforms of cops and cadets chatting peacefully. "He'd probably say we're late," Ari chuckled. "He'd be right." They sat in silence for a while. "I'm leaving for Geneva next week," she said finally. "UN invited me to help draft digital rights policy." He grinned. "Global stage, huh? Someone has to remind the world who's still standing." Elijah lifted his camera. "Mind if I keep filming?" "As long as you remember I'm not a symbol." He lowered it. "No. You're a sentence that hasn't ended." When she boarded the plane a week later, news outlets everywhere ran the headline, "Ari Reed takes Marcus's legacy global." She ignored them all. From the window seat, she opened her notebook and wrote, "Justice isn't inherited. It's rehearsed every day." The clouds rolled by like folded flags. She thought of Marcus, of stillness, of silence, of the way one man's restraint had built a bridge for every voice after him. In her mind, she heard him whisper, calm and firm, "Keep standing, kid," she smiled. "Always." Back home, Elijah released a short film called The Next Stand. It opened with Ari's speech, cut with clips of children practicing mock trials, engineers redesigning bias filters, and officers studying empathy modules. The narration was simple, just Marcus's old line. Slowed and remastered, "Silence feeds the beast." Then Ari's newer voice layered over it, "But knowledge starves it." The final frame read, "Legacy is not memory. It's momentum." Viewers didn't just watch, they acted. Donations poured into global reform programs. Students used the film in ethics courses. Police departments overseas translated it into 20 languages. On the anniversary of Marcus's death, crowds gathered again at the Peace Garden. The trees he'd inspired were tall now, branches thick with shade. Ari stood among them, eyes closed, listening to the leaves rustle. Beside her, Elijah set down his camera. "Think the world's ready to move without him?" he asked. Ari opened her eyes. He didn't want it to move without him. He wanted it to move because of him. She looked toward the statue, the same bronze stillness, hands folded, gaze unbroken. "Then let's keep it moving," she said, and the wind answered, bending the trees in quiet agreement, still standing, still moving, still teaching. Years turned like pages. Decades later, the world Marcus Reed once shook had grown into something both familiar and strange. There were still injustices, still protests, still fear wearing new masks. But there was also awareness, rooted, deliberate, impossible to erase. Every generation had its storm, yet each one remembered the man who stood still and refused to look away. In classrooms, children still began their civics lessons with 4 words written on the board: stand, see, learn, change. Some recited them like prayer. Others whispered them before walking into difficult conversations. Every whisper kept him alive. Ari Reed was older now, her hair streaked with gray, her presence commanding without effort. She had spent 20 years building what people called the Global Equity Network, a system of law and technology working together instead of apart. The United Nations had honored her. Universities taught her cases. but she kept her uncle's picture on her desk. A single black and white photo of him at the funeral. Hands bound, eyes calm. On a quiet evening in Geneva, she sat across from Elijah Brooks, now gray himself, camera resting beside his tea. "You ever stop filming?" she asked. He smiled. "Not until people stop forgetting." "They never will." He nodded. "That's why I keep filming." They sat in silence, the kind that comforted instead of accused. Ari looked out the window at the lake. "Sometimes I wonder if he'd be proud." Elijah followed her gaze. "He'd tell you pride's a cheap word. He'd ask if you're still standing." She smiled faintly. "Then I am." Later that night, they walked along the water. The city lights shimmered like metals on the surface. "You know," Elijah said, "when I started all this, I thought legacy was what you leave behind. And now," he looked at her, "now I think it's what keeps walking beside you." Ari nodded. "He's been walking beside us a long time." They stopped near a bench engraved with Marcus's quote, "Silence feeds the beast." Beneath it, someone had added newer words in smaller letters. "But courage starves it." Ari traced them gently with her fingers. "Maybe it's finally learning to go hungry." Elijah laughed softly. "You sound like him again." She shook her head. "No, I sound like the world he wanted." The following week, they traveled to the United States for the 50th anniversary of the Reed Cole Veterans Hall. The city had changed completely. Glass towers, electric buses, murals projected in light instead of paint. But the hall still stood in brick and steel, its flagpole gleaming under the sun. Inside, children guided visitors through exhibits. Holograms played clips of Marcus's testimony before Congress. A boy's voice narrated softly. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just asked the world to look. Ari watched, motionless. Tears welled but never fell. A little girl noticed her and ran over. "Are you Ms. Reed?" "Yes." "My teacher says you're the reason my brother wants to be a police officer." Ari smiled. "Tell him the world needs good ones." The girl grinned. "He says he wants to be like Marcus." Ari knelt. "Then tell him to be better than Marcus. That's how heroes rest." That night the ceremony began outside. Hundreds gathered under lanterns strung between the trees of the Peace Garden. Veterans, officers, families, children, all colors, all stories. Elijah set up his final camera. "One more film," he whispered. Ari took the stage. No notes, no podium, just a single light above her. "My uncle once stood still so the world could see its reflection," she began. "Tonight I ask you not to stand still, but to move with purpose. Because silence isn't only the absence of sound. It's the absence of courage. Don't let it come back." She paused, scanning the faces before her. Some young, some worn, all listening. When he was handcuffed at that funeral, the country gasped. But gasps fade. What lasts is what we do after we breathe again. The crowd was silent. Ari lowered her voice. If he were here, he'd say, "Keep standing." Not in protest, but in presence. Not in anger, but in truth, she looked toward the bronze statue at the garden center. Now, surrounded by tall trees and flowers, planted by generations of volunteers, still standing, she whispered. The crowd echoed it softly. Still standing. It spread like wind through grass, gentle, endless, alive. After the ceremony, Elijah found her sitting alone near the statue. "You ready to call it finished?" he asked. She smiled. "Stories like this don't finish. They just get quieter." He nodded. "Then maybe it's time for quiet." She looked at the sky. Quiet's where change hides before it grows. He reached into his bag and handed her a flash drive. "All the footage. Every film. Every voice. It's yours now." She held it carefully like something sacred. "What do I do with it?" "Whatever comes next," he said. Years later, after Elijah passed, the Global Archive of Justice released his films together under one title, The Reed Cycle. People streamed it in classrooms, community centers, and homes. In one final recorded interview, he had said, "I met a man who stood still and changed the world. I met a woman who moved forward and carried it. Everything after that is just gravity catching up to grace." The words played softly across continents. Ari retired at 75. On her last public appearance, she returned once more to Marcus's grave. The trees above were huge now, branches intertwined like hands clasped in prayer. She laid a single sunflower beside the headstone. "Uncle," she said quietly, "I think we finally learned to see. Not perfectly, but clearly enough to keep walking." A breeze swept through the grass, cool and tender. She smiled. "Thank you for teaching us how to stand." Her driver waited at a distance, but she lingered a little longer, watching the horizon fade to gold. That night, the city glowed with quiet celebration. The 100th graduating class from the Reed Academy took their oaths beneath the mural that never faded. One cadet stepped forward and raised her hand. "For those who came before, for those who will come after," still standing. The crowd repeated it, voices overlapping until the words became one sound, one truth stretching from past to present. Somewhere, in the shimmer of streetlights and wind, it felt as if Marcus Reed himself were still there. Calm, unbowed, eternal, and if anyone listened closely, beneath the hum of a peaceful city finally learning to look at itself, they could almost hear him say, "Justice isn't loud. It's steady. Dignity doesn't shout. It endures. Keep standing until silence sounds like freedom." The night grew quiet and the world at last understood. Still standing,